Hi, everyone. My name is Mary Pagano, and I'm the host here today for Hera Media Group. And I have a brilliant gentleman that I want to introduce you to. His name is Shiv Aggarwal. He is in India right now, but anywhere between India and London, you will find him. He is the CEO of EarthID. And so I think he's got a really great solution that will be important for everyone around the world. And I'm going to let him talk about that. So, Shiv, tell us who you are and welcome. Tell us about you.
Hi, Mary. Thank you for having me. So as Mary, you mentioned, right? So I'm Shiv Aggarwal, founder and CEO of EarthID, which is an award-winning decentralized identity management platform. I'm also leading Government Blockchain Association, a global non-profit organization across EMEA to further the adoption of blockchain technology. So before I actually deep dive, I just wanted to make a statement. So on the internet, there is no way to ascertain whether you are interacting with a credible individual or getting scammed by a punk or a bot. This is because the current version of internet is missing the layer of trust. And that is the biggest challenge that we are trying to solve at EarthID. And actually, in the 17 years of my professional career as a certified enterprise architect, I have driven IT strategy and digital transformations for global brands. And now I'm focused on driving the digital transformation of the internet through the provision of a safe and a secure decentralized identity. So that was a quick note about myself.
Awesome. So let's talk about EarthID. What's its vision?
So EarthID is basically about empowering individuals. It's about driving social and financial inclusion by providing a self-sovereign digital identity to all human beings. So that is what we are basically after here.
So we have a lot of people on this planet that don't have an ID, correct?
Absolutely. As per a World Bank report, there are over 3 billion people who don't have any form of identity. And that is where we are living in a world where more than half of the population is marginalized. We have a lot of unbanked people. And that is where I think if we look at the planet after, I think hunger, that is the second most important or crucial problem, which is basically not having an identity and sort of marginalized.
Yeah, exactly. So what industries and problems are you focusing on, and how can EarthID increase ROI for organizations?
So I think you would agree with me that, right, the digital identity is a cross-cutting concern and it's crucial for every industry and organization. So it's not like that we have a specific industry vertical that we are trying to solve a problem with. Actually, we are focusing on a lot of different use cases, which are basically looking at specific problems with respect to digital identity, right? And at EarthID, what we are ensuring is that our focus is on big impact use cases. And I will just talk about a few use cases here. So one of the biggest one that we are after is basically portable and reusable digital identities for citizens, employees, and students. Because if you look at the way the current identities work, they are paper-based, they are binary in the sense that you cannot basically do partial sharing. Either you share it with someone or you don't share it with someone. And then they are also very fraudulent. We have seen cases where the identities issued by different government organizations have been misused for various different purposes. So we are basically creating a solution which basically creates a portable and reusable digital identities for different types of stakeholders. We are also focused on digital onboarding of customers and users across public and private sector services, because right now we see that, right, when you have to open a bank account, or if we have to basically get a water connection or something like that, we have to go through a lot of hoops, and there's a lot of repetition, there's a lot of friction, and that is what EarthID is removing. Then we are also talking about tamper-proof licenses, certificates, and credentials. Because if you look at a human life cycle, when we are born, we get a birth certificate. When we grow, we basically go through our education. So we get a lot of educational credentials. Then we get employed, we get employment credentials. Then basically we get marriage certificates, so on and so forth, right? So our lives revolves around a lot of credentials, which can be misused and manipulated by a lot of fraudulent individuals or organizations. And that is where we have created a solution so that we can make them digital, basically paperless, and also tamper-proof.
Great. So as you know, Hera is building a smart green city for the future of humanity, for all genders, all religions, all nationalities, and with a strong theme in honor of the woman, right? We look at this as to be the first city in the world that honors women around the world, but also based on the future of humanity, because we feel like we're not living our best life around the world. And so in that, my question for you is, can you please share what EarthID's relevance for smart cities?
Absolutely, absolutely. And actually, you have you have brought up a use case which is very, very important and very, very interesting for us as well, right? Because when there are two elements here, right? One is basically you mentioned women, and then second thing is you mentioned smart cities. So let me talk about smart city first, and then we'll go to the women, because that's a more crucial topic which we should basically deep dive. But when we talk about smart cities, right? So smart cities, we all agree that smart cities is the future, right? Because that is what all the governments and countries are focused on, building more and more smart cities where everything is connected, right? Be it people, be it devices. Now we're talking about autonomous vehicles. So in that sense, the connectivity and the and the communication is basically massively increasing, and that is where it basically it gives it basically opens doors for a lot of frauds. It also basically opens doors for a lot of friction, because when you're basically interacting between different types of devices, individuals and organizations, there are a lot of different type of communication channels and technologies, which basically increases the friction. And then it's also about the cost, right? So because obviously when we want everybody to be connected, everything to be connected, there are huge costs as well. So this is where we at EarthID, basically we have created a solution which will basically ensure that that while we are helping organizations reduce or prevent frauds, they are also able to basically reduce costs and save time. And then also we are empowering individuals with data ownership, privacy, and consent. Because I think when we look at different data regulations and privacy laws around the world, it's very important that the individuals are able to own their data, and they are able to basically interact with different services in a very privacy oriented manner. And with smart cities, it becomes more and more relevant, because now we are living in a connected world where privacy is it comes at a cost.
Yeah, well, it's privacy seems to be I think a lot of consumers or a lot of people don't even realize the amount of data that is already stolen in regards to them, and especially for the children. I mean, that I always find that a bit dangerous, right, in regards to children's data. But I think for the fact that consumers can own their own data, control their data, and share it as needed, like opt in, opt out for whatever things that you need to do to be able to, inform whether it's health or things of that nature. But it's very confusing today for consumers to understand, that, when are they sharing their data and they don't even realize it, right? So
absolutely. And this is one of the biggest challenges that EarthID is tackling with. So we have undertaken the responsibility of education and awareness. We have conducted a lot of sessions around what data ownership means, what privacy means, and what are the pitfalls of basically sharing your data seamlessly across social media platforms. And now I think in this new generation where kids and basically teenagers, they are interacting with a lot of social media platforms, and they are oversharing information. What are different types of frauds, and what sort of crimes they can fall to, right? So that is where it's important. And also when we look at it from a social perspective, because we mentioned unbanked and marginalized society, so we can talk about refugees, where in refugee camps we can talk about the problems with respect to human trafficking, child trafficking. And this happens because they don't have any form of identification, and that is where it's very difficult for the authorities to sort of take care of them. And that is why I think a solution like EarthID is very relevant from a social cause as well.
Yep. What's EarthID contributions to new digital ecosystems like Web3 and Metaverse?
Right. So I think when we talk about EarthID, there are three key principles that you work with, right? So one is decentralization, the second is democratization, and the third is self-sovereignty. So when we talk about decentralization, it's about the decentralization of control. And and I think a lot of people would understand this from Bitcoin, right? But when we talk about blockchain industry as a whole, it's about decentralization of the control, decentralization of the data. So that is one key principle. The second thing is democratization, because if we look at the current world, most of the services, most of the value are sort of controlled by a handful of organizations, and that is where the problem of marginalization, unbanking, and all those come, right? So if we are able to democratize access to services, to value, and to finance, and so many other things, we would be able to drive inclusion. And lastly, self-sovereignty. Unless we are able to basically own our own data, own our own assets, I think we would always be challenged, right? And that is where the third principle is also very important. So these are three key principles we work with. And with these three key principles at the core of our solution, we are able to basically provide a secure and frictionless access to Web3 and metaverse-based ecosystem. Because one of the challenges right now, when we talk about these new ecosystems, is basically, again, the friction, right? Because a lot of people around the world, they don't understand, first of all, what these are, what they mean. But then even if they're interested, they don't know how to access, right? Even if they try to access, they fail because it's very complicated. And that is what the problem statement we are focusing on, to basically enable secure and frictionless access to Web3 and metaverse-based ecosystems.
Wow. So you're looking at simplifying it. So
absolutely, that is the keyword.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a crazy world to navigate sometimes. I mean, probably everybody has a mobile device in one way or another, right? Even in some third world countries that may not have the proper infrastructure, but they are getting more and more access to mobile technology, which allows them to tap into the internet and learn around the world, which is really so critical important. So a question for you: how can EarthID help drive inclusion across marginalized societies, especially for women?
Right. So I think this is one of the, and this is our main vision also, right? From a longer term perspective, we want to basically ensure that we are able to drive social and financial inclusion. But to drive that, I think we need to understand the underlying problem, which is basically which is about access, right? I think I have mentioned this in my previous answers also. But I think right now, if we look at the world, right, it's sort of very fairly divided. And when we look at the people, I think it's about, we are sort of divided into underdeveloped world, developing world, and developed world. And then that is where we can see across the three types of worlds also, we can see that a lot of people, they don't have a basic form of identity through which they can access different services provided by governments, provided by private sector. See, the thing is, like, we have people or organizations around the world who want to provide value to the people or provide access to the people, but the means is missing, right? And even if they have the means with respect to having an identity, that can be easily defrauded, and that is one of the biggest challenges, right? And as per World Bank, if we can basically provide digital identity to all human beings, we can unlock the GDP of a lot of big nations, right? And then that is what our focus is. And when we look at, for example, we have done pilots with certain governments where we have provided digital identity to farmers so that they can basically become part of the system, so that they can get support from the government, they can get access to finance, they can access to insurance, right? So this is where the keyword is access, and that is where for you to access anything, you need some form of identification, and that is what EarthID is about enabling. Now, when we look at women, right? So at EarthID, we believe that it's very, very important for the world to grow, or for the world to be able to basically achieve the full potential. I think it's very important for us to empower women, right? Because we can look at our own households, we can look at our families, we can look at our businesses. We can see that women play a very strong role in driving the economy, in driving the society. And this is where I think it's like the upliftment of the world is actually dependent on the upliftment of the women. And what we have seen is, like, whenever we see a woman in a leadership role, they are very, very inspiring. If I cannot generalize this rule, but I think when we look at men as leaders, they basically they do real good in their own roles. But when we look at women in leadership roles, they actually inspire complete entire societies and entire ecosystem, right? So this is where it's very important that we as an organization, and we as a society, we focus on empowerment of women. And that is why we at EarthID, we want to work with organizations like Hera, who can basically help us bring our value, bring our solution, bring our technology for the empowerment of women.
Brilliant. Well, we are on the same mission, so excited about that. In regards to having an ID, I mean, it's something that most people don't necessarily think about, right? I mean, they think, well, I had my birth certificate, I have my marriage certificate, you know, I pay my taxes. That's probably how they know that I exist, right? Because I'm paying taxes. But there's a lot of people that, you know, don't necessarily have the means, right, to even make a living to some extent, and yet nobody
Absolutely.
knows whether or not they're here or not here. And I would imagine that being able to know every human being exists, right, for their protection, I think would be an important aspect. The question is who controls that data, or who owns that data? I mean, even though the individual owns that data, right? How do you know that it's not in the hands of the wrong people, right?
Absolutely, and I think one of the the key question is the data ownership. But then also, once you have established that, it's also about the data monetization, right? Because I think data is one of the key ways through which we can basically empower people with income, right? I think that is it is one of the ways which we haven't actually explored. We have seen big organizations doing that, but we haven't actually achieved that for individuals like you and me and other people who can actually use their data for basically getting first, second, or third income, right? And also, I think what I also feel is that when a disaster happens, actually, that is when we realize the potential of or the benefit of having an identity, right? We can talk about Ukraine, we can talk about wars in Middle East. When their lives get disrupted, when they have to basically move from their homes to basically other regions or other refugee camps, that is where they realize, okay, if they have a proper identity, they can actually basically collect their lives and get back on their feet very quickly.
Boy, that is so true. I mean, I sometimes I think, you know, gosh, if I lost my passport or I lost my drive, like, you know, I wouldn't have access to all kinds of information that
Yeah,
I would need. And yet we live in a digital world, and we're still tied to a lot of paper to some extent. You know, I'm looking at where do I put my paper that it's in a safe space, but actually, if everything is digitalized and I can access it anywhere in the world, and it's my data, right? That makes, I would imagine, you know, I would love to see the borders go away to the point of, I mean, we're all human beings on this planet, right? Why can't we just live anywhere that we want to and pay
absolutely.
taxes according to wherever that we are, right? Would that make the governments make it more enticing for people to want to be there, to visit or to live, right? But this whole idea of refugees around the world, I don't even know what the total account is. I would imagine it's quite large. And it makes it very difficult for everybody, and not just for the refugee alone, but there's so much talent all over the world that we're not necessarily tapping into to, you know, make our world a better place. And
Absolutely.
so there's I feel like what you're onto here is really important, so that everybody could be accounted, can be, you know, recognized and have the same opportunities no matter where they are.
All right. I just wanted to add one more quick point to this, because which is a very important aspect, which is sustainability, right? Because I think we can talk about a lot of other things, but one thing which is important, also important, is sustainability. Because like the amount of paperwork that we are using as human beings or organizations with respect to identities, onboarding, so and so forth, right? Or compliance, I think it's humongous. And actually, with a solution like EarthID, we can actually sort of make all that paperless, right? We can optimize all the processes, we can make them paperless, and then we can basically truly drive sustainability. Because right now, if you look at around the world, we have this superficial focus on sustainability. We have ESG goals, right? But are we truly basically moving towards them or not? Are we just counting carbon credits? Because we have solutions which can actually solve the problem. The question is, how do we basically take these solutions and ensure that we are truly driving sustainability?
Yeah, no, I totally agree with that. I catch myself many times. I'll print something out. I'm like, Mary, do you really need to do that?
Right.
So it's a habit that I'm working on changing, so that way I can, be more, sustainable. And I'm always looking at my impact, right? Like I gave up my car. I don't need as big of a place, right? I'm looking at all kinds of ways that I'm reducing my thumbprint or my
Yeah, it's
whatever it
about
is.
truly being responsible, and I think it's like every one of us, one would have to basically contribute towards this. Yeah, like you
Yeah,
are doing.
yeah. So is there anything else that you want to share with us that I haven't asked?
No, I think it was a very good conversation. I think it's about that we want to make sure that we are able to basically take this solution, which can actually solve some of the key challenges around the world. And we want basically support from people like you and others who can help us basically focus on the right problems, which actually which are important, right? Which should be solved, right? Because obviously we can take the solution and we can sort of look at a lot of other problems. But I think it's about what is the right focus, what is important, what is crucial, and what is important for humanity as a whole. Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. Appreciate that. All right, Shiv, I really enjoyed our conversation today. I'm going to put everything into the bio, so I will make sure that I can let people know where to find you. I know you're traveling a lot, so I ran into you in Miami, so who knows where you're going to be next, but I really am very excited about what you're doing, and I think it's an important piece for United Nations, for governments around the world, and for everybody on the planet to be recognized as being a human being on the planet. So thank you for your work. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Mary, for having me and inviting me to on your platform. Thank you very much.
Right, great.